close your eyes for a second and imagine the loudest cheer you've ever heard. Now double it. That's what it felt like inside Seoul Olympic Stadium on a warm night in 1996. The lights cut through the dark like laser beams, the bass from Earth Song shook the ground, and 60,000 people were already on their feet when Michael Jackson suddenly did something nobody expected. In the middle of the song, with smoke rolling across the stage and a giant crane lifting toward the sky, he spotted a young fan near the front row. Instead of just giving a wave, Michael reached down, took her hand, and, yes, really, brought her onto the crane with him. Think about that for a moment. 1 second she's a face in a massive crowd, the next she's soaring above tens of thousands, standing right next to the king of pop himself. No pre-show briefing, no safety rehearsal, just the spontaneous connection that made the entire arena lose its mind. Phones weren't everywhere back then, so people weren't staring at screens. Every single person was locked in, screaming so loud you could feel it in your chest. This wasn't just a cool concert stunt. Michael had a way of breaking that invisible wall between performer and audience, and this might be the most dramatic example of it. He wasn't content to simply sing, he wanted the crowd to live the performance with him. You could see it in the way he moved, calm, confident, almost like he'd planned it all while still making it feel like pure impulse. And imagine being that fan. Heart racing. Knees shaking. Looking down to see an endless ocean of lights and faces while the man whose music filled your bedroom speakers for years holds your hand. For a moment, it's not just a show, it's a private duet in front of the world. That's the kind of memory that lives forever, the kind that friends might not even believe when you tell them later. Michael Jackson lifted me into the sky while the entire stadium screamed. So how did it all unfold? Was there a signal, a glance, some hidden plan? Or was it simply Michael's instinct to turn a great concert into a once-in-a-lifetime story? That's exactly what we're about to break down. From the energy of that historic night to the split-second decision that sent a fan soaring above the crowd, let's rewind to the very start of an evening no one inside that stadium would ever forget. To really feel the impact of what happened that night, we need to step right into Seoul, South Korea, October 1996. Michael Jackson's History World Tour was in full swing, and the Seoul Olympic Stadium had turned into a giant, electrified hive of sound and light. Picture it, more than 60,000 fans packed shoulder to shoulder, the autumn air cool but buzzing with heat from the crowd. Giant video screens framed the stage, lasers sliced through thin layers of mist, and the bass line of Earth Song rumbled so deep you could feel it in your ribs. Michael was at the absolute peak of his career. This was the same tour that shattered attendance records across continents. Fans had been lining up since dawn, some even camping overnight just to get as close as possible to the stage. And if you know anything about MJ shows, you know this wasn't just a concert, it was a full-blown theatrical event. We're talking meticulously timed pyrotechnics, dancers in perfect formation, and that towering crane waiting quietly in the shadows for the big finale of Earth Song. Now, here's something most people don't realize, that crane wasn't just a flashy gimmick. Michael used it to create a jaw-dropping visual where he'd rise above the entire stadium, almost like a living statue floating over his fans. Stage engineers had rehearsed every movement, height limits, balance checks, even wind calculations, because safety had to be flawless. But what no one rehearsed was what came next, a completely unscripted connection with one fan that would change the vibe of the entire night. From the first beat of the show, the energy was electric. Fans waved homemade banners in Korean and English, and the noise level was so high security staff wore ear protection. When Michael first appeared in his iconic gold and black military jacket, the stadium literally shook. Journalists later compared the sound to a small earthquake. This was the kind of crowd where every move he made, a single spin, a flick of the hat, sent waves of screams rolling like thunder. As the set list moved toward Earth Song, anticipation built. People knew this was the grand finale, the emotional high point. Stage lights dimmed to a haunting green, smoke crept across the floor, and that massive crane began to hum to life. Nobody, not even the crew, could have guessed that this carefully engineered piece of equipment would soon carry not just the king of pop but also one very lucky fan into the night sky. And that's where our story really ignites, a stadium at fever pitch, a superstar at his most magnetic, and a moment about to blur the line between performer and audience forever. Now, let's zoom in from that giant stadium to a single face in the sea of thousands. Somewhere near the front barricade stood a young Korean fan, early 20s, maybe, clutching a handmade sign that shimmered under the stage lights. We don't know her name for sure, concert footage never caught it clearly, but her excitement told the whole story. She'd probably been waiting since dawn, maybe even the night before, to claim that precious spot near the crane's base. Imagine the nerves, hours of standing, heart pounding every time a sound check echoed through the arena, hoping just to catch a glimpse of her hero. Friends who attended that show later described the front rows as a buzzing hive of energy, fans waving banners, camera flashes popping like tiny fireworks. Among them, this young woman stood out. Maybe it was the way she kept her eyes locked on Michael, or the sparkle of her silver headband that caught the spotlight. Whatever it was, something about her presence seemed to draw him in, even from a distance. During the earlier numbers, she barely moved except to sing every lyric. No frantic jumping, no pushing, just a kind of focused awe. When Earth Song began, she lifted her sign high, a simple message in bold letters, half English, half Korean, something like "Thank you, Michael." The cameras from the big screens caught a flash of it for a split second, and people nearby noticed how her whole body trembled with adrenaline. Here's where it gets wild. According to stage staff who later spoke to Korean media, Michael had a habit of scanning the crowd for moments of pure connection, faces that mirrored the emotion of the song. They said he could somehow pick out a single person in a massive audience, like he had a radar for genuine passion. Whether that's science or just stage instinct, who knows? But it fits the way he performed, always looking for a spark to feed the magic. As the crane started to rise, Michael moved toward the edge of the platform. The spotlight followed, and suddenly it hit her. You can almost hear her intake of breath in the grainy fan videos. 1 second she's another devoted face in the crowd, the next, the king of pop is right there, reaching down. The people around her stepped back instinctively, giving space, their own screams turning into a collective gasp. That's the moment when the story shifts from an epic concert to something far more personal. It wasn't planned, it wasn't scripted. It was a silent conversation between a global icon and a single fan who had dreamed of nothing more than seeing him live, and suddenly found herself about to share the stage in the most unexpected way imaginable. The opening chords of Earth Song rolled through the stadium like distant thunder, and the crane's mechanical hum blended with the haunting melody. Everyone knew this was the big finale, the moment when Michael usually soared above the crowd alone. But this time, something felt different. From his spot center stage, Michael began to glide toward the crane's base, his eyes sweeping the front rows with laser focus. Dancers slowed their movements, the band kept the beat low and steady, and you could almost sense the audience holding its collective breath. Down at the barricade, the young fan's eyes locked on him. People nearby could see her hands shaking around that sign, her lips parted in disbelief. Michael paused, tilted his head ever so slightly, one of those classic MJ gestures that sent a ripple of cheers through the stands, and then took a few deliberate steps in her direction. A camera operator swung the big stadium lens toward the scene, and suddenly her face flashed across the giant video screens. The crowd went wild, realizing they were witnessing something unscripted. Security guards instinctively shifted, ready to keep the barrier intact, but Michael gave a quick nod and the tension eased. It was as if the entire crew knew he had something special in mind. Stage designers have since said that the crane's lower platform could safely hold 2 people, but it wasn't meant for spur-of-the-moment guests. Still, when the king of pop extended his glove-covered hand, nobody dared to interrupt. The fan hesitated only a heartbeat before leaning forward. You can almost imagine the rush of thoughts racing through her head. Is this real? Am I allowed? The music swelled as the choir's voices climbed, perfectly timed with her first step onto the small platform. People around her screamed encouragement, phones and disposable cameras flashing like a mini lightning storm. Michael steadied her with a calmness that seemed almost rehearsed. He offered a reassuring smile, one of those quiet, world-stopping smiles that said, "You're safe. I've got you." Stage lights swung upward, bathing the crane in a soft blue glow as the operator received the subtle cue to lift. The massive arm began to rise, slow and smooth, while the band hit the chorus with full force. From the floor, fans craned their necks to watch the impossible unfold. Two silhouettes, one the most famous entertainer alive, the other an ordinary young woman, started their ascent above a roaring ocean of people. The tension in the air snapped into a roar of cheers so loud it almost drowned out the music. This wasn't just another spectacular stage move. It was a once-in-a-lifetime connection, unfolding second by second, with 60,000 witnesses barely believing their own eyes. The crane rose higher and higher, moving with a smooth grace that belied its size. From the floor, it looked almost surreal, two small figures gliding above a sea of glowing lights and upturned faces. Michael stood confidently, one arm lightly around the fan, the other hand gripping the rail as the platform ascended. The young woman clutched the metal frame, her hair catching the breeze from the stadium air currents, eyes wide as the ground dropped away beneath her. The band swelled into the powerful chorus of Earth Song, and the timing was perfect. Every drumbeat seemed to echo the slow climb of the crane. Fans down below screamed and waved, their cheers rising like a tidal wave to meet the pair above. Some people were jumping in place, pointing upward, desperate to capture the moment on their early camcorders and disposable cameras. In an era before social media, this was still a once-in-a-lifetime story they couldn't wait to tell. Michael's composure was pure showmanship. He moved with that signature, almost weightless glide, occasionally turning to look at his unexpected guest with a gentle smile. It wasn't the kind of smile you give during a routine meet and greet, it was the kind that says, "This is your moment too." He leaned slightly toward her, giving a reassuring nod as if to say, "You're safe. Enjoy this." The fans' reaction was a blend of shock and pure joy. At first, she gripped the rail with white knuckles, but as the crane reached its peak, high enough for the whole stadium to see them silhouetted against the night sky, she loosened her grip, daring to look down at the endless ocean of faces below. Imagine that view, 60,000 fans, stage lights blazing like a miniature galaxy, and Michael Jackson standing inches away, singing one of his most powerful songs. The music reached its emotional peak, and Michael raised his free hand toward the heavens, a classic gesture of hope and unity. The fan mirrored him, almost instinctively, her arms stretching into the night as the choir's voices soared. For a few breathtaking minutes, it felt as though the two of them were floating, suspended not just above the crowd but outside of time itself. People on the ground were beside themselves. You could hear a single collective scream that seemed to vibrate through the metal beams of the stadium. Some fans were crying openly, others clapping rhythmically in time with the music. The stadium cameras zoomed in, projecting their faces onto the giant screens, and you could see the astonishment etched across the fan's face, a mix of awe, disbelief, and pure exhilaration. When the crane finally began its slow descent, the roar of the audience only grew louder. Michael gave a final wave to the crowd, then to her, making sure she felt every bit of that spotlight. It wasn't just a concert spectacle anymore, it was a living, breathing memory, captured forever in the hearts of everyone lucky enough to witness it. The second the crane began to lower, the stadium turned into something almost indescribable. Imagine 60,000 people all screaming at once, a sound so loud it wasn't just heard, it was felt, like a vibration in your chest and under your feet. The roar of cheers and applause swelled to match the final chords of Earth Song, spilling past the stage and echoing through the night air of Seoul. People were jumping, hugging strangers, waving banners high above their heads, because they knew they had just seen something nobody could ever fully explain. From the floor, fans were pointing upward with wide eyes as the crane descended. You could see entire rows of people on the giant screens, mouths open in disbelief. Some were crying openly, tears streaking their cheeks as they shouted Michael's name. A few even dropped to their knees in pure overwhelm, and the cameras caught every second of it. Security staff who had been watching carefully from the barricades looked stunned themselves, some of them grinning despite their usual professional calm. One thing about big concerts, even if you're in the nosebleed seats, you can feel the ripple of energy when something truly unexpected happens. People in the highest rows said later that the moment felt almost supernatural, the lights reflecting off the crane like a glowing comet, the sound of the crowd rolling up toward the sky in waves. It wasn't just noise, it was a living, breathing reaction that fed back into the performance, like the audience had become part of the music itself. Journalists covering the show that night wrote later that the cheers were among the loudest of the entire history tour. Some compared it to the sound of a small jet taking off inside the stadium. And remember, this was 1996, no one was distracted by phones or live streams. Every single person's full attention was locked on the stage, eyes following Michael and the fan as if watching a miracle unfold. As the crane touched down and the fans stepped carefully back onto the stage, the applause actually got louder. Michael gave a gentle bow toward the crowd, then helped his guest back toward the edge where security was waiting, making sure she was steady on her feet. The audience responded with a second wave of cheers that felt almost like gratitude, not just for the performance, but for witnessing a rare, once-in-a-lifetime connection between superstar and fan. For a few moments after the music ended, no one moved. The stadium lights brightened, the band struck a final chord, and people just stood there, clapping and cheering long after Michael had left the stage. It wasn't just the end of a song, it was the kind of shared, heart-pounding memory that every person in that crowd would carry for the rest of their lives.